Alrighty, guys. Welcome into compute this to the After Schrock, I guess. I'm going to refresh here so I can make sure I get your comments and everything while we get everybody joining up. Alrighty. Come on now. Oh, yeah. I'm number 2. I just joined. It's pretty crazy. All right. So, as I mentioned during the show, I don't have a pre-formed list for the After Schrock today. I don't have a list of things to chit-chat about. There's so much going on in the world and in the news and everything right now. Let me see. This last week, just to bring you up to date, just in case you were under a rock, in the last week, we had the Ukraine counteroffensive. That was big news. We had the Cape Cod story with the migrants, which was ironic. What else did we have happening? More legal Department of Justice Mar-a-Lago document shenanigans are happening. Was it Oregon? Some race in Oregon actually flipped to a toss-up between the Republican and the Democrat. Stuff's getting out of hand in Oregon when the Republican can win, statewide office. That's kind of crazy. So there's a lot going on in the world, and if there's any of it you want to talk about, that's great. The markets, we basically FedEx came out and just told the truth, and they said shipments are down. Businesses are not shipping things around, and that's what businesses do to make money. Therefore, we are idling planes, we are freezing hiring, we are doing the things that businesses do when there is a slowdown. Some people would call that a recession. Some people refuse to use the R word right now before a midterm. So whatever your stance on that, it doesn't really matter. FedEx told the truth about what's happening. And as a result of what is actually happening in the economy, the stock market took another dive. There are some people who believe there's a 30% dive in the cards yet to come, like not a single day, but cumulative. We have another 30% to the downside. I just remember I was listening to Fox Business, and then there was one guy who was like, now some of these tech companies, they're amazing. I mean, you can buy in Microsoft at a 17 times earnings multiple. And maybe I'm misremembering, but I seem to remember like decades ago, listening to the radio and having people talk about price to earnings ratios when I was learning what those were, and that 7 to 11 times. Literally, what they're saying is the price of a stock is 17 times more expensive than the revenue that will be generated from that stock that year. So 17 times earnings that are expected. So if earnings disappoint, it's way more than 17. If earnings surprise to the upside, it's less. I don't see that happening too often right now. But 17 times earnings, that means to break even on that stock, you'd have to hold it for 17 years? Is that, I'm not an investment advisor, guys. It just seems that 17, if you told me that I could buy something today for 17 times what it is worth annually, that I would have to hold on to it for 17 years to break even. Of course, you can sell it in that time and realize a profit. If you hold it for a year, for example, you get a little bit. And then if you can sell it to the next guy for 17 times what it's worth, well, there you go. It just 17 times earnings. But the way he was saying it was like it was such a great deal. Like, this is amazing that you can pick up these stocks at 17 times earnings. And I'm like, my gosh, if there's another 30% drop in the market, I mean, maybe we're back down to like 11 times earnings, something like that. Is that where things start to get more reasonable? And then like the housing stuff, my wife was looking at houses yesterday online, and it's something we do from time to time. We're possibly in the market for a slightly larger house, but we're going to do it on our terms, basically. And the housing market for the last few years has not been something you can do on your terms. I'm not going to buy a house sight unseen without an inspection and bid 30% over the asking price in order to get to win. I have a comfortable house. I don't need to do this right now, so we're going to wait. And so by waiting now, here in Omaha, we're seeing the prices coming down. And if the prices are coming down in the Midwest, that they're coming down dramatically in the bubble cities on the coasts. So there's something afoot. Something is happening. it's impossible to get a real read on the data. One of the things, an article that I read yesterday was explaining how the employment data has. So in other words, why is it that the Fed is doing all this tightening, but it's having no impact on the employment market? It's like we're not seeing job losses. At this point, if we were in a recession, that's the whole argument against us being in a recession. In a recession, there are job losses. Why are we not seeing job losses? The methodology and the way that one of the reports counts jobs counts every job as a new job, even if that job is worked by the same job holder. So let me give you an example. You're working full-time, 9 to 5, at the widget factory. You have a full-time, you have one job. But then, because things are getting super expensive, you take on a part-time job delivering pizza at night for Pizza Hut. Yay, we've just created a job. One person working 2 jobs. It's not indicating growth in the marketplace or an increase in employment. That's why you're not seeing the unemployment rate changing much, but you're seeing all these jobs created. Meanwhile, you can't hire anybody. Something just doesn't add up in the numbers. Where did all the people go? They couldn't have all died from COVID shots or COVID-19. Where did they all go? They're all on disability? Are they all, do they have like little stringy fibrous tumors and heart problems and all kinds of stuff? Or, I was talking yesterday with a guy at church about this. I was like, how is it that people just stop working and they're fine? Like, how does that happen? How do I get that gig? Because it seems to me, going back to colonial times, if you don't work, you don't eat. So now, how did we get to a place where you could just quit your job and be fine? I don't understand. Where are these people going that are quitting their jobs and going fine? Now you have this new thing. It was called quiet quitting. Now you have a new concept called quiet firing, where bosses basically pigeonhole employees into dead-end positions and forget they exist. They don't give them raises. They don't give them recognition. They don't do anything for them. They literally work them until they quit because they're non-valued. I don't know. Quiet quitting, real quitting, quiet firing. I don't know. But all I know is we are always on the hunt for talented people at Schrock. People that are good, the people that can become senior technicians. That's who we rarely can hire senior technicians cold. They just the type of technician that we need doesn't exist in nature. They usually have to be built, or at least refined into what we need them to be. And then at that point, once they have that base skill set, they're equipped to go to just about any place. Every place from scooters all the way to Kiewit. We've had people leave for AMD. We've had people leave for Google, for Apple. Excuse me, not for Google, for Apple. I mean, it's crazy. But we finding those people and then getting them into the position they need to be in, and then helping them understand how to do that job, and then having them stay interested long enough to do all that. It can be a real challenge. So I don't know where all the people are going. I have no idea. But there's definitely something in the economy right now that is not right. And we can all sit here and argue about what it is or whose fault it is, and I'm not really interested in whose fault it is at this point. That's something we can decide at election day or whatever day. Right now, my concern is, where do I put my money? Money is supposed to be a store of time, right? I'm not getting any more time. God gave me the time that I've given. So I've chosen to cash some of that time out for savings, for money, so that I can support my family and I can retire someday and I can, travel a little bit, maybe have a little fun. How do I protect that? How do I keep that from going away? And literally another guy on Fox was like, there is no safe place to hide. It was also, so there's one guy that's like 17 times earnings is an amazing deal, and the other guy's like, there's no place to hide, you're all gonna die, and it's like, and then Peter Schiff comes along, the gold guy, and he's like, well, this is stupid. I've been buying gold for 30 years, you should be buying gold too. And then they're like, well, the price of gold is actually down today. Yeah, it's down because they're manipulating it. They won't be able to manipulate it forever. Well, you've been saying that for 30 years. If I put my money into gold 30 years ago, I would still have gold. If I put my money in stocks 30 years ago, I would have a lot of money. So I understand what people who are anti-gold investors are saying. But then on the other hand, you look at everything that's going around you right now, and it makes you want to buy an extra pack of toilet paper at the grocery store, if you know what I mean. Maybe I should have a little gold in the house just in case, so everything goes to complete trash. But then the US dollar is doing what it's doing because it's the cleanest dirty shirt in the hamper. Well, at what point, how soiled can we become? We've got a second war or a third war potentially brewing in Europe now. Greece and Turkey want to get into it. 2 NATO allies want to start fighting each other. They've submitted documents to NATO that they're going to probably fight. Well, that's just great. The thing in the Ukraine that's going on right now, there's a counteroffensive, which was hilarious because Russia doesn't have the troops to hold the land that they've taken. So basically, Russia had inflated, they were like a really fragile balloon. And then apparently the Ukrainians received some advice that they should feign an attack to the south. And Russia moved a bunch of troops from the north down to the south to counter that. And instead, the real attack came in the north. And they just rolled over it was a paper force there to begin with. But then that paper force was really thin because a lot of troops were moved. They just rolled over and took all that territory that Russia had just fought so hard for. Ukraine is estimating they've killed 53,000 Russians fighting and injured 3 times that number. Russia has not given a casualty estimate since the second month of the war. So I don't know. Everybody lies in war. So I mean, one side can't really be believed exclusively. I don't buy everything that Ukraine says as the gospel truth. But on the other hand, Russia's not saying anything. So that would lead me to believe that there could be some issues going on there. So, like I said, the world is a messed up place right now, but we're here to talk about it, guys. So, Richard, welcome aboard. Mitch, good to have you. Steve, good to have you here. Karen, Roger are back. I've heard Nebraska football has gotten bad because of former athletic director Steve Peterson back then in the early 2000s, as well as getting rid of the Tom Osborne offensive plays. Well, Sebastian, there could be some truth to that, I guess. That was one of the things that I thought, during that. I watched the first half of the Oklahoma game, and then I turned it off because I was like, no, God has given me a certain amount of time in my life, and I'm not going to spend it doing something I'm not enjoying. So, no, I'm not going to watch this. And so part of me was like, you know what? They're having trouble getting the offensive rhythm going. You know what I'd love to see right now? Option left. Quarterback option right, followed by quarterback option left, followed by a run up the middle, followed by quarterback option right, followed by a throw to the running back in the backfield who runs. It's like, that was Osborne's offense. He would run the ball until defenses were just exhausted. And then in the fourth quarter, you'd see these explosive blowout scores. Well, the thing that's changed in football from the Osborne years is now there's back then, Nebraska was like the preeminent football program. Like if you wanted to play college football, you would come to Nebraska unless you were a wide receiver because you weren't going to get thrown the ball. Unless you were a tight end, because you weren't going to get thrown the ball a lot. You were going to block a lot on running plays. If you wanted to go to the NFL and you wanted to showcase your talents in college football, and a lot of times you would go to one of the schools in the South, like a Florida or a Texas, that had more of a throwing offense. So if you want to get the great recruits, you have to have an offense that allows them to showcase their talents to get something that they want out of the program. And so that desire to modernize the program and make it more of an NFL-esque program has been, I think, ever since Osborne left. Every coach has tried to do that to some extent or another. No one wants to be a one-dimensional football team unless you have a one-dimensional football team that can't be stopped. Which, so yeah, it's really frustrating. In the first quarter, you have a lot of 3-and-outs because you run it up the gut and you get stopped. You run it up the gut and you get stopped. And you run it up the gut, you get a first down, yay! And you run it up the gut and you get stopped. And you run into the option and you get the first down, yay! And then 3 or 4 minutes later, the defense finally stops you because you've just been literally running the ball every time. Not a lot of excitement there, right? But there was a lot of winning. especially later in the game as the defense on the other side started to break down and get a little tired, a little weaker. Nebraska always had superior conditioning in the 90s. I don't know what the running regimen was. There wasn't guys standing around with their hands on their knees, tired. It just didn't happen. And part of that was because the offense would keep the opposing team's defense on the field for so long that our defense had some time to rest. So anyway, it's easy to look back at the Tom Osborne era and say, that was amazing. How did we lose that? Sometimes in life, there are people who are put in a place to do a job that they were literally born to do. And I think Tom Osborne was one of those people. Just right place, right time, right person, right plan. Boom. Executed beautifully. Done. It was one of those lightning strike moments in history. So now everybody's been so focused on how do we recapture that lightning strike? How do we get back to that former glory? Where they don't realize that Tom Osborne never set out to build glory. That wasn't ever what he did. He set out to get 4 yards on the next play. All you need in football is 4 yards every play, and you win the football game. That's it. 4 yards every play. And keep the opposing team to less than 4 yards every play. That's all you have to do to win a football game. Everything else is just icing. And that's what he would focus on. So tackling. You didn't see arm tackles. You saw guys getting stood up, wrapped up, and pulled down. You didn't see these. When did it become? I don't know. Somebody's training the kids to do this, and maybe I'm not a football coach, so maybe there's a reason for this. But tackling with your back. So you see guys turn around and like throw their back into them. Maybe that's like a thing so you don't get spearing or targeting or whatever. But have you noticed that like this like spinning your shoulder and like hitting them with your back kind of thing? Yeah, I'm sure it makes for really powerful hits unless you miss, or unless the guy spins off your hit and you can't wrap him up because your back is turned. But you didn't see people doing that during Osborne's years. You saw guys getting in front of the runner, standing him up, wrapping him up, bringing him down. It was fundamental football. And so I don't think you can have a fancy pants offense until you get the fundamental football right. Now the problem with fundamental football is it's really friggin' boring. It is really boring, especially for razzle-dazzle players that have NFL prospects. It is boring. Which is why Tom Osborne had one of the best walk-on programs ever. Because he could take a guy who was willing to do the work every day, the boring everyday work, to get a boring everyday outcome that moved the ball 4 yards every play, and he could turn that guy into a player who could play with the razzle-dazzle people. So then you get in like the Orange Bowl, right? And like you got people throwing like that was the joke that Nebraska just couldn't defend against a pass in the 90s. They would throw these bombs on Nebraska's defense and just boom, touchdown. They couldn't run on them. They couldn't get yards there, but all just throw over their heads and they were fine. So the teams in the 90s had weaknesses too. But the guys that were playing there were brought up in a program that honored the fundamentals, that said if you're a razzle-dazzle player and you're not willing to do the fundamentals, then you're just not going to play at Nebraska. You should go find some place to play where you're going to be appreciated. And we'll take this guy that's willing to work his tail off, who is too short and too light, but is willing to work really hard every day and move that ball 4 yards and be happy about that outcome. And we'll build a whole team around those guys. Then we'll bring the razzle-dazzle guys back in, and we'll say, now look at this. We can move the ball 4 yards every play. We can set up these big long bombs that you might want to have to throw, because everyone expects us to run the ball and move the ball 4 yards. Well, then all of a sudden we throw a 50-yard pass. Where did that come from? And that was the beauty of what Osborne did, is you had to respect the option, because if you didn't respect the option, he was perfectly content running the option on you all day long. Option left, option right, option left, option right. Sometimes the quarterback would pitch, sometimes he wouldn't. Doesn't matter. You got to pin 2 guys over there all the time on each side. and that opened up the whole middle of the field. Well, then, if you get a running back that punches through the center of the line, there's no linebacker there. So yay, you get 4 yards. And everything was intended. On the option, yeah, sometimes he would bust, Tommy Frazier would bust one out and go down the field and everyone would cheer. But really, he just had to get 4 yards. That's all he had to do. Every play was get 4 yards. And I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm not a football coach, and I feel guilty commenting on this because I'm not in that world. I don't have the base knowledge. I don't feel like as a fan, I have some knowledge, but I don't have the base knowledge required to tell somebody how to do their job. So I don't know how to fix Nebraska. I genuinely don't. I don't know if firing Scott Frost was the right decision. Could you have waited another week and saved like $9 million? Yeah. You were going to lose to Oklahoma anyway, so you may as well have waited another week. I don't know. Pragmatic decision there. But long story short, guys, I don't know how you fix Nebraska in the short run. I don't think there is any fixing it in the short run. I think it's a program culture fix that's going to take a decade to do. Tom Osborne didn't invent Nebraska. He took over what Bob Devaney had started. So I think what we need to be resigned to here is in the Nebraska football program, we need another 10 to 20 years of middling teams so we can rebuild a program that can be like the one in the 90s. No one wants that answer. If you can throw money at it and get a different answer, you'll do that. If you buy a new weight room and get a different answer, you'll do that. Nobody wants that answer. But what struck me watching the first half of the Oklahoma game, and for those of you who are not Nebraska fans, I apologize for this long talk about Nebraska football. But it's near and dear to the hearts of everyone in Nebraska. It literally grew up on it. And to see the team in the state that it's in is just, I realize these are just kids playing football. They're real kids that have real feelings, and they don't like to lose any more than the next guy. But they are. Every time, every year, year after year, every close game. Games that shouldn't be close are close. Then we lose them because they're close. Something is wrong. It's just kind of like the economy, right? Something is wrong, and you can see that it's wrong. The outcomes are telling you it's wrong, but you can't quite. There's so many opinions and so much fake information or false information or incorrect information. You can't figure out what's going on. So, I don't know. What struck me about that game was when Oklahoma lined up on the ball, you did not know what you were going to get. It was a surprise. They were a multi-dimensional team that had confidence in so many areas. And when Nebraska lined up to the ball, if you line Nebraska up in the right circumstances, they will march down the field on you. And if you line up Nebraska's defense under the right circumstances, they will stop you every time. But if you change those circumstances just a little bit, Nebraska can't change. They just keep doing the same thing, and it doesn't work. But they just keep doing it, and it still doesn't work. So they just keep doing it. They do it harder, and it doesn't work harder. And it's, like I said, I'm not a football coach. I'm sure there's people watching or listening right now that are like, Thor, you're an idiot. I could very well be an idiot in this regard. I freely admit this is not my area of expertise. Speaking as a fan, who would have thought? Roger and I were talking about this last week. Last week he said, during the Nebraska game, he goes, there was a time where you just sit, you'd watch the game. Like, you didn't interrupt the game. You watched the game. He goes, now this year, in the middle of the game, I went and got my wife ice cream at Sonic. And I'm like, in the middle of the game, I went to Walmart, to Hy-Vee to buy tapioca pudding for my wife because she was making a recipe and she ran out of pudding. And it was like, it happened twice. I bought pudding twice during the football game because I didn't want to miss a moment. There's something clearly not right. And the problem that Nebraska is going to have very soon is that people are not going to pay for the tickets to go to the games that Nebraska continually loses. People want to be entertained. This is not entertaining. This is not fun. It's not fun to see your team lose every time. Yes, all the other stuff matters. All the other culture matters. Honoring people in the middle of the field is great. I love it. The culture of the program's history. But it's like a smack in the face honoring Johnny Rodgers and having Tom Osborne out on that field and then watching what happens on the field after that. It's just, Ugh. But again, I don't know what to do to fix it. I'm not a football coach, and let's hope Trev Alberts has some ideas. Maybe he knew exactly what he was doing with Tom Frost. Who knows? Steve, I turn off my computer when I'm not using it. Would it be a good idea to leave it on this week? You know, Steve, if you turn off your computer when you're not using it, don't do anything different. I mean, they're going to put out a big update for Windows 10 or 11, possibly on Tuesday. That update's going to take a month to really filter down to everybody. That's why people are like, oh my gosh, the moment it arrives, you know, we want you to run Safe Upgrade the moment that it's available to run so that you don't get swept up throughout the rest of the month in one of these automatic updates. We will have people that come into the service center on day one, they get hit with an automatic update that blows up their computer. Most of our customers are not those customers, though. And I say that because most of our customers have computers that last way longer than computers that are normal in the marketplace. Therefore, Microsoft positions them later in the upgrade queue. Most of our customers have custom machines that we have built or custom laptops that we have modified, which moves them to the end of the build queue. It's the people that have the Dell, that have the HP, that have the Alienware, that have the Gateway or the Acer. Those are the people that are going to get the update. Those are the sheeple that are going to get the update automatically, immediately, and blow something up and come into the service center. Those are the people that really need to run Safe Upgrade like the first couple days. So we just tell everybody, run it the first couple days, knowing full well that, well, you probably saw my expression that we had a couple callers that were like really upset, like really worried, and I'm just like, don't worry about it. It's first of all, it's going to take 48 hours. Even if you left your computer on and let it go, it'd take 48 hours just to download the update from Microsoft. Then it's going to want to apply the update, which means you have to reboot your computer to apply the update. And it's going to wait 14 days before it reboots it automatically to do that. So anytime in that period, we can run Safe Upgrade and trump whatever's been done to the computer by the automatic update process. So that's why I was kind of like, you know, don't sweat it super hard if you're not available in the moment in time when the release comes out. I'm not saying you have to sit in front of your computer all day Tuesday. I just want you to be aware that it's coming potentially on Tuesday. Again, that's a rumor. It has not been confirmed by Microsoft. However, Microsoft never announces these ahead of time. They usually release them a week or two after a patch Tuesday, so toward the end of a month. So this week is a little odd. Usually we'd see it at the end of the month. So it could be next Tuesday. You know, we just don't know for certain. So with the rumor that we're hearing, though, of it being Tuesday, we are scrambling to make sure we are ready, and we want to make sure that you're ready too. Good to have you, Cheryl and Rich. Roger's back. Okay. Good morning, Schrockville, Mark says. Without an agenda for the After Schrock, could you discuss the availability of blueberry scones at Hy-Vee? You know, I have not purchased blueberry scones at Hy-Vee in some time because the lovely Kimberly made a cinnamon scone recipe the other day that was just, I mean, Hy-Vee, just pack up the dough. You're done. So yeah, I've been eating my wife's baked goods. They're pretty good stuff. But no, the availability of blueberry scones at Hy-Vee, I've been off the scone train a little bit. And, well, let me rewind here. We have an employee in the Omaha Service Center. It's not Trenton. Trenton is going to stay, but Trent, his last week is coming up this week in Omaha. So if you talk to Trent, wish him well. He's moving on. He's going to Scooters. He's going to be IT support for Scooters over there. With that said, I've been in the Omaha Service Center more because, you know, hiring guys is really tough right now. Hiring guys who are good. So, you know, like I've hired 2 guys in the last couple weeks. One of them is working out really well. The other one ghosted me, didn't even show up for one day of work. So we're down 1 employee right now. So hiring this extra guy brought us up to current. But then when Trent leaves as a senior technician leaving, we're really going to be, you know, short again, which means I will need to fill in because we got Parker filling in Lincoln, training staff there, getting Alex and his team up to par. So I will be in Omaha a lot more over the next few weeks, especially as I hire and train another new person. So in the morning, I will go to Hy-Vee because I buy those Hy-Vee gift cards. So if I have to buy anything later that afternoon, I can use the gift cards. I get the free gas money. It works out real well. But while I'm there, I will stop at the bakery, and I've been doing apple fritters recently. So I'll pick up 2 apple fritters, which I should only eat 1. I know this. But I buy 2 anyway, with the excuse that I'll skip lunch. So, like, literally, when I go to work, I don't I don't leave until I'm done. So I don't go get lunch and come back. I don't. I might go to the bathroom a couple times, um, but I don't like stop until I'm done. So I'll leave the house, take my daughter to school, and I'm usually in the shop by 8:30 ish. We don't open till 10, so that's my quiet time to get ahead on everything on the bench, get everything doing something, get all the notes, make sure everything's got notes on it, so I know who I need to call and what I need to say. Um, and then when 10 o'clock hits, we can hit the ground running. And I usually roll out around 7, because that's usually when my wife tells me, I don't care if everything is done or not. You need to come home. You need to eat dinner. These kids need a bath and a bedtime. I'm like, okay, I'm on the way. So that's how my life has been. So I've been off the scone trip a little bit, more onto the apple fritters. So for what it's worth. They're good. They're delicious. All right, what do you think of the changes coming to Ethereum? It's it's super interesting because the change that happened with Ethereum, for those of you who don't know, Ethereum is a cryptocurrency, kind of like Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin, the only real big complaint about Bitcoin is its algorithm. How it works is proof of work. So in other words, your computer must do a certain amount of work in order to be credited with Bitcoin. And of course, the more computers that do the work, the harder the work gets because they want to keep the amount of Bitcoin being rewarded the same. So if the computers get 10 times more powerful, the rewards get 10 times smaller. You see, so it's always consistent. So the problem is there's this race. There's always a race, especially in Bitcoin mining, to have more powerful equipment. And more powerful equipment usually uses more power. So you're pulling a lot of power. You're using a lot of energy. And right now, that's not cool to use a lot of energy. It's not cool from the ESG movement standpoint. It's not cool from the I got to pay the electric bill standpoint. And it's not cool if you're in California from the, hey, you're going to cause a brownout standpoint. So what's interesting is worldwide, energy use for Bitcoin mining is going up. It's still using less energy on a monthly basis than the Visa network does, although it's not processing as much transaction as the Visa network does. But more people are installing more capable equipment and using more electricity every day with Bitcoin. I think it's going up 3% in the difficulty. That means the network got 3% more computing power in the last 2 weeks. Even though energy prices are going up, people are still mining Bitcoin. That tells you something weird. But anyway, Ethereum used to be the same thing, proof of work. You had all these graphics cards. At one point I had 48 graphics cards on these shelves, all mining Ethereum, and I'd get my Ethereum money and then, pay the power bill and everything else. Well, now Ethereum has switched to what's called proof of stake. So it's different. Instead of proof of work, now all those graphics cards are quiet because they can't do anything to earn Ethereum anymore. The only way to earn Ethereum now is to stake Ethereum you already have. So let me give you an example. The whole purpose of mining is to confirm transactions on a network. So when I spend my Bitcoin, if I buy a cup of Starbucks with Bitcoin, somebody on the Bitcoin network has to process my transaction to confirm that that transaction was legitimate, that I initiated it, that it went to the same person, that I had the coins that I said I had, that the person that received the coins they were supposed to receive. That all happens through the mining process. So Ethereum wanted to get rid of the mining process but maintain the accountability of the cryptocurrency. How do you do that? Well, they came up with an idea called staking. So what that means is, let's say I have $10,000 worth of Ethereum. I take that and I deposit it in an account. And then the Ethereum network says, okay, so you have $10,000 deposited. You can confirm transactions up to $5,000 in total value. Okay? So now, and it's not like something that I have to sit down and do. Just the fact that I stake the funds in the account, it's a smart contract. It just happens. So now it can confirm other transactions. And let's say I am super smart hacker guy and I manipulate the process and I start confirming transactions that aren't real. You know what I mean? Like I set myself $1 million, baby. Well, I can only send up to half of what I stake. And I can only, if I confirm a transaction that's incorrect, I lose my stake. I have to make it right. So the smart contract doesn't allow that to happen. For the vast majority of people, this is pretty straightforward. You put your money in a bank account and it earns interest. Now, what is the interest it's earning? It's Ethereum. And how is it earning the interest? By confirming other Ethereum transactions that are happening on the network. Okay? So from that perspective, it's pretty straightforward. Your stake is locked up. You can't withdraw it. It creates stability in the coin. So it's a place for people to park coins where they can't access them to sell them in the marketplace, which means Ethereum's price is a little more stable. It's been going up a little bit more than Bitcoin because people have been locking away their stake so that they can continue to earn Ethereum because you can't mine anymore. Now, the thing I want to point out, what happens to all the graphics cards? What happens to all the guys like me that I used to have those 48 graphics cards just chugging away. Well, there's other guys that have mines that make that look like a joke. We're talking like shipping containers full of graphics cards, all running and mining stuff. Well, now they can't mine Ethereum anymore, which is the one thing that they were really mining. So now a couple things is going to happen. Number one, you're going to see a lot of used graphics cards hit eBay and the other secondary markets. Lightly used, never used for mining. Yeah, right. They've all been used for mining. They've all been beat to hell and back. They still have some life in them, but they've all been rode pretty hard. You're going to see a glut of graphics cards hit the marketplace. Number two, you're going to see increases in the issuance of other cryptocurrencies like Dogecoin. Other coins that you can mine with graphics cards, people are going to turn the graphics cards towards those coins to get at least something, right? Now, the problem you're going to run up against is power efficiency. Can the graphics cards mine enough Dogecoin that you can sell it and pay the power bill and still have some money left over? The answer is usually no. So that's why I think a lot of guys are just going to sell their graphics cards at this point. But, what are you going to mine? Monero? What are you going to mine? So the merge is going to have reverberations outside of the Ethereum community. But it's an interesting experiment. The reason this has been going on long before ESG was a thing. The desire to switch to a proof of stake rather than a proof of work, because there's the what happens when quantum computing comes to proof of work. That could become infinitely hard problems with infinitely capable computers. It's really things get wonky at that point. Proof of stake, pretty straightforward. You either have it or you don't. And if you do, you're confirming transactions. If you do have it and there are no transactions to confirm, you don't earn anything. Well, then why would you keep it? You would sell it, which would be a transaction, which is somebody's going to have to confirm. So, you see what I'm saying here. Just the ecosystem is self-sustaining at this point, and that's something that's good to see. How this is going to fit into whatever framework the U.S. government comes up with for cryptocurrencies. The Biden administration released a framework for cryptocurrencies this week. Let me give you the quick lowdown on it. Bitcoin equals bad. Central bank digital currency equals good. There you go. That's the framework. Let's see. Thor, I'm running Windows 11. Recently, there's a new screen that comes up when I turn on the computer. It gives me a screen showing different theme screens. It looks like an Edge browser screen. It's a circle with an X. Yeah, that's an Edge welcome screen asking you to set up your Edge browser. What do you want your home page to be? What do you want this to be? And then, of course, the last question is, do you want to make it the default browser? So if you keep clicking the circle without going through the prompts, it's going to keep popping up every time you start the computer. Read the prompts as you go through them so you don't accidentally change a default setting that you don't mean to change, and then the prompts won't show up anymore. On Fox News last night, they talked about a meeting with Xi and Putin. They mentioned that China is hurting with food costs also. That their housing interest problems, that China has real problems. I read a story on Friday, and I laughed because I remember this because I read it out loud to my wife because I'm like, oh no, China is tapping the strategic pork reserve. That's right, we have a strategic petroleum reserve, but China has a strategic pork reserve where they keep all these frozen pigs in strategic reserve in case there's a problem with pigs. Because China is the world's #1 consumer and producer of pork. Literally, it's like their protein staple. It's what they eat for protein in China. So they don't want civil unrest, so they keep a supply of pork. Well, the price of pork is getting too expensive for the average person. They don't want civil unrest over grocery costs in China, so they're releasing food from the strategic pork reserve. It sounds funny every time I say it. To bring down the cost of pork. They're flooding the market with pork. It's kind of like what the U.S. does with dollars. We just kind of flood the market with dollars to bring down the value of the dollar. Well, they flood the market with pork to bring down the value of pork, and then people can afford pork. And then China purchases pork later and restocks the pork stockpile, so the consumers, they're just shifting the costs around so the consumers don't see them. Kind of like what Biden has done with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve by draining it virtually empty to keep the price of gasoline low during the summer months. Now that it's empty and we're going into a recession, or we're in a recession, he's right. It's time to start refilling it, but let's let the price drop a little bit below $80 a barrel first. I think the Trump finished filling that up at something like $30 or $40 a barrel. So yeah, that filling it again at $80 a barrel would be a significant cost. But hey, just use the magic money tree, print it, you're good. So China does have issues. Russia has issues. Everyone in the world has issues right now, and this is what's so interesting. Everybody's got a problem. Canada has a food production problem because of ESG movement on fertilizers. Europe has problems with war and food and energy because of the Russia-Ukraine thing. South America has political instability, as they usually do, as well as hyperinflation now, because as the Federal Reserve tightens the U.S. dollar, it has the side effect of exporting inflation. I won't go through all the hoops to get from point A to point B, but just know that when we tighten, when we restrict, we increase the value of the dollar. These South American countries have borrowed dollars, right? So when they want to repay their dollars, if we make the dollar stronger, it makes it harder for them to repay their debts. So it causes inflation in their economies. So you see Argentina, I think, hit 75% inflation this week, year over year. So South America's got its problems. Africa, they've got all kinds of problems all the time. Who else is there? I mean, let's see, we talked about China. It's got their housing problem, their pork problem, the Taiwan problem. Japan has a giant tropical storm approaching. That's a problem. Fukushima-like tropical storm. There's problems everywhere you look right now. And I try to remember that saying in my head that the stock market climbs the wall of worry. But I can't square the circle and put my money back in right now. I just can't do it because it's like, what has changed, right? So it seems like last month, I got close last month. I'm like, okay, we're turning a corner. It's rallying up here. The dollar is weakening, which is weird, but okay, it's causing everything risk asset to rally. All these tech stocks are going back up. I don't want to miss that train. Literally, I thought about going in and changing my allocations of my 401k back to tech. I was strongly thinking about it to the point of like, I should do that when I get home tonight. But I didn't. Thank God. Because it was all false. As soon as the FedEx thing came out, as soon as the inflation numbers came out, and here's the thing that blows my mind, the thing that I learned this week that I didn't know before, is that when they talk about CPI, the inflation number, 1/3 of that, roughly, is rent. Okay? So when you have CPI elevating like it's elevating, and 1/3 of it is rent, that deserves being looked into. Because rent is a long-term agreement. It's a 1-year minimum agreement, typically. So if you have inflation in rents, it's not going to stop for a year. Minimum. And if rents comprise 1/3 of the CPI, you'd almost have to have deflation in other areas of the market to compensate for the higher rents. And we're certainly not seeing deflation. So why would you think that inflation has peaked? So then, as if on cue, I heard a news story where they're interviewing a couple people, and of course this is anecdotal, so you take from it what you will. A woman upset because her rent for her apartment or wherever she lived went up. I think she was in New York. went from $2,700 a month to $5,600 a month. It literally doubled. And she's like, we can't afford it. So we called the landlord and we're like, hey, come on, it's double. Can we work something out? And the landlord said no. And it's like, wow, what a heartless landlord. Well, you got to remember, these landlords were told for a year and a half that they couldn't even charge rent. And then when the rent came due from that year and a half, nobody actually paid it. People just bailed. They just left. Got another apartment somewhere else. So that landlord housed that person for a year and a half, rent-free, took all the hits to the property from use, all the wear and tear, all the things, all their costs to refurbish the property now have escalated because of inflation. So yeah, rents are double. And no, I won't work with you because I will rent it to the next person for double, because that's everyone is doubling their rents everywhere. So if rents are doubling, naturally then you want to say, well, maybe it's time to buy a house, right? Interest rates, 6% on a mortgage now. Now, historically, that's pretty low. But historically, in the terms of somebody who is buying their first home for what they've seen in their lifetime, this is an ungodly high interest rate. How am I supposed to afford a house like my parents have when I can't borrow with 0% interest? Well, that's the thing. You were not supposed to buy a house for your starter house like the house your parents have. They started with a starter house. You should have seen my first house or my second house. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We literally left the neighborhood we lived in. The lovely Kimberly and I moved out. A meat truck overturned on the interstate, and a dude came to our door trying to sell the meat that he picked up off the interstate. And when my wife tried to shut the door, he stuck his foot in the door. Now, we had one of these giant, like this house was like a 1900s house, so the door was solid oak. And he stuck his foot in the door. She just shut the door with vigor. And the guy yelped and he ran away. So that was fun. And then the thing that finally crossed the line, there was two events. We got a ding-dong. There's two sheriffs at the door. And they're like, yeah, your neighbor next door, have you seen this guy? They show us a picture. We're like, yeah, we've seen him. Well, he says that this is his residence where he lives. Does he live there? We're like, no, he doesn't live there. He's there once in a while, but that's these other people's house. That's who lives there. They're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, he's wanted for rape and murder and all these other things, and he's out on parole, and he says he's living there, but we think he's lying. So thanks for the information. If you see him, please don't approach him. Just call 911. Then there was the guy who got stabbed in our backyard. Yeah, at that point, my wife's like, forget this. We're moving. We're moving to Papillion. And I'm like, how am I supposed to afford that? And she's like, I don't know. I don't care. Figure it out. We're not going to have any furniture. We'll figure it out. She goes, because we have little kids and we can't have this. Now, that was what it was like 15, 18 years ago. Okay? Now imagine what it's like for someone in that same predicament, where they're living in a house in a neighborhood that is not as safe as they would like. Their rent is doubling. They can't afford to buy a house because the down payment requirements are elevated right now because everyone's concerned about safety and mortgages. And the interest rates are at 6%. So even if you can buy a house, the only house you can afford is a house in a bad neighborhood. What do you do? What do you do? Well, you're going to have to make cuts in other places. You're going to have to do like what the lovely Kimberly and I did and not have any furniture for a year. Like literally we had this house. We had a 4,000 square foot house and we had furniture from an 1,100 square foot house that we took with us. And it was like, why is this house? This is empty. But it was a house in the neighborhood in the school district we wanted. It was the house we wanted. But there were definitely times where we were digging through the couch cushions to find change to buy diapers for Jacob. Because, we were not rich people. We were definitely in housing living beyond our means, and we had to pull from other areas of our life. I was driving a 1992 F-150 that I had Mako repaint because, it was kind of rusty. It was a construction vehicle originally. It was always yellow. So I had to repaint it red. Then, I had to tint the windows myself because, I couldn't afford to have some guy tint them. And then I put some tires on it, and it was a sight to see. And that has gone down in Schrock lore as one of my most interesting trucks. But it got me from point A to point B. It was paid off. I didn't have to. I traded it for. I think I traded that truck for a holiday special desktop computer, literally. So it was a $1,600 truck. Yeah. So anyway, you take from other areas of your life to compensate for the area you're overspending in. Now the problem is, what happens when every area of your life is forcing you to overspend, and you're not buying meat, or you're not buying cheese, or you're not buying milk, or you're not buying the basic things that you should be buying to eat. Well, you get roommates. You live with family members. You do all these things that cause demand for housing to drop at the same time that the affordability of the housing is getting more expensive, which is eventually going to cause the prices to drop. There's just no way around it. If you want to sell a house and there's nobody buying the house, and the people who want to buy the house can't afford the house, the price of the house is going to have to come down. So it's just a matter of time. Oh, let's see. Nebraska football. The stands were emptying in the third quarter. And I remember when I was a kid, the announcers were like, "These Nebraska fans, this is phenomenal. Here we are in the fourth quarter. Nebraska's up by 4,000 points, and they're still sitting in the stands cheering on the second and third and fourth stringers on the team. This Nebraska program, the culture here is just phenomenal." Well, our second, third, and fourth stringers only get to play now if there's an injury, because our first stringers are out all the time. We've turned into one of the teams we used to play. And how do you get back? How do you get back? I don't know. What would you recommend for the most secure email service, not including Yahoo, Google, Microsoft, Apple, understanding? Okay, so David, for secure email, it will have a cost. Anything that's free is not secure, number one, because you always pay for it in some way. Number two, there's a couple out there that advertise that I've heard of. One of them is Reagan Mail, like the President Reagan, Reagan.com. The other one is Proton Mail. Proton Mail is a little more widely known. Proton Mail is a little more... Proton Mail is there to be secure, private email. The Reagan email, it's the same thing, but it's kind of you're aiming it after a President Reagan. I see what you're going for here in the marketing, but it kind of cheapens the product a little bit. Reagan wasn't an advocate for privacy. He was an advocate for economic growth and opportunity and prosperity. So if it was like an investment firm and you were calling it like Reagan Investments, okay, I see that. But Reagan Mail, I don't get it. But anyway, Proton Mail is where I would look. Okay. KJ, you're correct about Husker football under Osborne. We all knew Nebraska was a fourth quarter team. If it was a close game in the third quarter, Nebraska would usually take over in the fourth. Yeah, it was always a good game until the fourth quarter. Now it's like you can check the score in the third quarter, and if it's a close game, you just turn it off because you don't want to see it happen again. Nebraska football. I think a lot of the players are more concerned about how many dollars they can earn from endorsements nowadays. Well, I hear the tone of what you said there, and I can hear that you disagree with the opportunity there. On the flip side, I can tell you with certainty that in the 90s, the players on that football team were getting paid. Not directly. They didn't go to work. They all had jobs, but they never went to work. You know what I mean? They were getting paid by friends of the program. They weren't missing any meals, let's put it that way. Now, it wasn't like endorsement kind of money. Like, yes, if I'm a hot shot little football kid and I can get an endorsement deal on a Wheaties box and I'm, 19 years old, you better believe I'm going to take that money. And if I have to go to a certain college to get that money, I will go to the certain college I have to go to get that money. So should players be getting paid in college football? There was an interview I heard this week where they were talking about that, and they said basically most coaches don't have a problem with players getting paid. They just want to have the entirety of college football under the same rules. Because right now there's different rules in different conferences and different rules in different regions. So a player could get sucked out to a different region because they're not allowed to get endorsements in a different region. But they're going to go where they can at least try to get an endorsement. Or if there's two schools that are equally weighted, they might choose the school where they have an opportunity for endorsements over the one whose conference says they can't do that. So uniformity in the rules would be nice. But, I don't think it's the dollars in Nebraska's program. I mean, I genuinely, there's an X factor that's missing. And it's one of those X factors that when you have it, you know you have it. And you can see it. And when you don't have it, you definitely do not have it. Great example. You could have a team that's completely competent, but does not have that X factor. 1 year ago, the team in our Omaha Service Center could fix any computer problem you brought them. Customers were always leaving happy, yet the service center was financially underperforming. It was not meeting goals, and it was resulting in people getting smaller raises than they would like. And, when we lose a front desk, maybe we took a month or two to fill that. Maybe we slow rolled that a little bit, because do you really need a front desk given the amount of volume you're generating? X factor that was missing was we had a bunch of guys in there that really were not comfortable making suggestions to customers. No matter how many times we explained to people, I understand there's a fine line between sales and making suggestions. You know what I mean? So when I call you up and I tell you your computer works great, but it's slower than snot on a cold day because it has a mechanical hard drive, and you really need the external hard drive or the solid state hard drive because every piece of software, including this big update that's coming down on Tuesday, is assuming you have one of these. So if you don't have one, your world is going to get more and more crappy until you finally get one. So you may as well just get one. I had guys that did not want to have that conversation, even though they knew it was true, even though the customer brought their computer in because it was slow. And they would say, well, it's slow because, your hard drive is a mechanical hard drive. And they would leave it at that. So, X factor difference. Your computer is slow because it has a mechanical hard drive. Leave it at that. Or, your computer is slow because it has a mechanical hard drive. I can make your computer 10 times faster than it is now if I upgraded you to a solid state hard drive. Solid state hard drives are more expensive than mechanical hard drives, but you don't usually buy one that's, you don't buy a terabyte usually, because most customers don't use that much. In fact, you only need a 200 gigabyte drive. So that drive is $200. If it's something you wanted us to do, it's something I can do today and get it done for you. But when you get the computer back after doing the solid state upgrade, it is going to be faster than the day it was you bought it. And it's going to solve all these problems. The slowness, like when you're typing and it has to catch up with you. The internet slowness, it's not that the internet is slow. It's your computer can't process the signals from the modem. It's just too slow. And the hard drive is too slow. It needs to be sped up. Because number two, you don't have enough memory in the computer. And it's using virtual memory, which is the hard drive. So it's literally like everything comes back to the hard drive. And if we speed up the hard drive, everything is going to get better. And still, I'll have some customers that don't do it. Majority of customers do take the suggestion and make the change so they can get years more use out of their computer for a small price rather than buying a whole new computer and getting all the new headaches and everything that go along with that. The X factor was the explanation. It is possible to be a great technician to tell a customer why their computer is slow and not give them an option on how to fix it. Customers will say, some customers were like, oh, okay, well, how much is it to put that hard drive in to make it faster? Oh, okay, and then they would be fine talking to them as long as the customer initiated it. But that X factor that I try to bring in when I come into the service center is I want to make sure that you're aware of all of your options. You don't have to buy anything when you come into Schrock. But if you brought your computer in because it's slow and I tell you why it's slow and you choose not to fix it, and you call me back the next day, it's still just as slow as it was the day I brought it in. Well, whoever you talk to is going to read my notes, and my notes are going to say, computer is extremely slow. Recommended solid-state hard drive. Customer declined solid-state hard drive. And that's what the guy's going to say. Well, we told you why it was slow, and you said you didn't want to fix it. So it's slow. Still. Why would you think we fixed it? You told us not to fix it. You didn't want to do it. So that's that X factor from Nebraska football. There is something like that that's missing, where you can get a bunch of talented guys together on a field, and they can do everything right. They can do the drills. They can run the ladders. You get the coaches. They're throwing the balls. They're catching the balls. They're kicking the balls. Everything is working great. But when you put that together on a field, there's an X factor. There's something missing that is preventing Nebraska from having that clutch confidence. I remember when Frank Solich was in there, they were bringing in like psychologists, like, you guys really are good. You guys are Nebraska. You guys really are the best. You just have to believe it in your brain, and then you'll be on the field and you're going to win every time. And it was like, you're kidding me, right? Is this like woke you? Like you're going to bring in a psychologist to tell us how good we are? Rather than, and that's the thing, when my son played football, he's a big kid. He's bigger than me. He's 15. He's taller than me. He weighs more than me. Built for football. Kid was built for rugby. I mean, he was built. He didn't enjoy football because he didn't like hitting people. He just doesn't have that instinct to go out and knock someone on their tail. So while I was watching him play, I could see that he just was not hitting people. Like, he was doing the minimum of what had to be done. Like, he'd run up to the guy with the ball and grab onto him and pull him down to the ground. But there wasn't the desire to drive your shoulder through the person and knock their soul through the goalpost. Like, that was not there. And that's what you want in your football team, right? So I'm Googling, like, how do you build aggression, whatever. And the thing that came back, for youth coaching anyway, was you build aggression in kids on the football field through experience and repetition. They have to know they can do it. And once they know they can do it, then they're going to do it harder and harder and harder until they're doing it at maximum capacity. But there is no way you can coach a kid to be more aggressive. You literally have to put them in the position of being aggressive. So, okay, I get that. So Jacob's playing football, and then he gets pinwheeled by somebody. Like somebody hit him in the legs, and he's boom, flat on his back. And that moment, his football career was over. He was done. He never went. I mean, he finished the season, but he didn't go back next season. It was like, oh gosh, Jacob. But it was just the thing, and we were okay with it because we just watched all the concussion movie and stuff, and we're like, yeah, if he's not enjoying it, we're not going to force him to do this, So anyway, Sebastian, speaking of the economy, why are liberal Democrats such bad politicians who want to get rid of jobs and making money? This is something that in the past I've struggled with. It's obvious that what you're doing is breaking everything. Why are you so freaking stupid? Either you're stupid or you have some nefarious objective in mind. Obviously. Those are the only two possible conclusions, that you're not like me. And I used to believe that for a long time. That it was just dumb. Liberals are just stupid. They're stupid people. And honestly, in my life, I have friends who are liberals. When I go out with these friends, we don't talk about politics. We don't talk about the economy. We don't talk about anything really serious at all. We just talk about the ins and the outs of life. We make fun of the waitress who says the weirdest things at the most inappropriate times. We enjoy each other's company. And then we part as friends, And so it's possible to have people in your life that you disagree with politically that are still good people. Now, maybe those people have radically different beliefs than you do. Maybe they do actually base a lot of the decisions they make in life out of the emotion of the situation rather than a principled compass. On the other hand, though, there are people on the left side of the aisle that do make their decisions on a principled compass. Their compass just is different than mine. They genuinely believe that man is destroying the planet. They genuinely believe that with the same ferocity that you and I believe the Constitution is, the end-all be-all document that everything should be run by. And that if we sometimes compromising your ideals is necessary to achieve a goal. So on the left, just like on the right, remember when there was a Supreme Court appointment that Obama was going to make, and he was going to put Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court. And the Republicans basically filibustered it. They stopped the ability of the president to get a hearing on a Supreme Court nominee because they wanted to see if Trump got elected, then they could they could take a Supreme Court nominee from Obama. And they did. And at the time, it was like they had all these principled arguments about how, it's not the will of the people, why we should let the people vote, blah, 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 blah. And all of it was BS. It was all BS. It was pure hardball politics. The same pure hardball politics that Nancy Pelosi plays. It's just we don't see the Republicans play it that often, which is why it was kind of weird when President Trump came in and all of a sudden, it was like he was throwing hard balls at little leaguers' faces, and you're like, ooh, that's not very nice. And he says mean things, but then all of a sudden you said kids hitting home runs, and you're like, okay, I see how this can work. And I think that the bottom line is that either side of the political spectrum, if taken to its extreme, is not good. Let me give you an example. I definitely have libertarian tendencies, right? My wife said she was talking to somebody online, and they were like, it's just wrong that the government lets this happen to people. And my wife reminded this person that it's not the government's job to inhibit your freedom. It's the government's job to protect your freedom, to preserve it. That's the only role of government, is to preserve your freedom, not to tell you in what ways you cannot exercise your freedom. And the lady said, well, you must be some kind of radical, And so it's like, literally, like, if you take libertarianism to the extremes, where government's only role in life is the specifically enumerated items in the Constitution, well, then we don't have interstates. Because it's not in anyone's financial interest to build an interstate. You're going to build a toll interstate? I mean, really? States will build highways. Maybe the states will get together and link their highways up a little bit. But the interstate highway system ceases to exist because it's not in the Constitution, and it's not an enumerated power of the Constitution. So I mean, if you go down the rabbit hole all the way to the bottom on one side, you can end up with a quality of life that is not as good as the one you have now. On the other hand, I think we're starting to see, if we go down the rabbit hole on the left side with the ESG and the renewable energies only, no fossil fuels, that kind of stuff, we can see where that's leading when we look at Europe, and then we look at what's happening in America, because a lot of our LNG is going to Europe. So the truth, I think, lies somewhere in the middle, right, between the two extremes. And in American politics, there's a pendulum that swings back and forth. And with Trump, it swung to the right, and now with Biden, it's swinging back to the left. And it's causing each of the opposing sides to become more energized. Now, the problem is there's a very slim margin of people in the center that are people like the people that my wife and I went to dinner with the other day. They're not political people. They vote, but they're not political people. They make up their decisions based in large part around what the people around them say to them about politics. They don't really research it or read or, get into the arguments of why or what the principles are, or read the Federalist Papers. They're just normal people, right? And those are the people that decide elections, and the Democrats understand that. And so while the Republicans are making very principled arguments, and it took 24 hours for Martha's Vineyard to deport 50 illegal immigrants to Cape Cod, but we're a sanctuary city. It was a humanitarian crisis when 50 people showed up. I mean, my goodness, what a ridiculous thing. But it was a stunt, but it illustrated the absurdity of the left's position of, we're a sanctuary city, but please don't come here. Go to those other places, but don't come here. But we signal that we like you. You're good people from a distance. Stay on your side of the tracks. It just illustrated the absurdity and the falsity of that. That it's not true. That they don't welcome these people. That they don't care about these people. That these people are just political pawns to them in a giant game with Republicans and conservatives and liberals and everything else. And when you realize that, you can't blame the migrants for wanting to come here. I'd want to come here if I didn't live in America, especially if I can get here and then I'm given a free bus ride to Martha's Vineyard. Holy Greg, I've arrived. I was telling Roger, I'm gonna go to Martha's Vineyard. I'm gonna get a little piece of cardboard, hold it up that says "Will work for Cape Cod," and then maybe they'll send me to Cape Cod, and I can just go there for free. Yay! I mean, this is literally the insanity that we're doing with human beings, and they're just living their best life. They're like, this is way better than getting persecuted at home. Wow. And so, I don't know. It's disingenuous when the left says that the Republicans are using these people as pawns in a political game, when that's literally what the left is doing. And literally, when the left is accusing Trump of all these heinous collusion things, and then you look at the evidence and you see that people on the left are actually doing the things that they accused Trump of doing, and it's documented right here. We have it's in the public record. It's not true. Can't talk about that. You're banned. It gets frustrating, right? So it leads you to believe that in this us and them mentality, whereas it's the people in the middle, the reasonable, everyday people, that you're not going to go out to dinner with them and talk to them about the illegitimacy of the Biden administration and the stealing of the 2020 election. They're not going to respond to that. And this is something that especially MAGA Republicans haven't figured out yet. That the people that agree with you, they're going to agree with you all day and all night. There's a lot of people that agree with you. But you need to get more people. So you need to reach out to people who don't necessarily buy the Kool-Aid, right? And you need to bring them into the camp. How do you do that? Well, you go out to dinner with them. And you talk to them about their heating cost, their electric cost. You talk to them about how you don't understand how grandma is making it on Social Security right now when you realize how little she gets. How on earth is Gigi making ends meet? Maybe we should send her some food or some money or something. And Gigi will protest strongly, as she always does, because she's proud. But that doesn't mean that her heating bill is any lower. And it's kind of, it's a burden on the children now to look back and say, well, are my parents okay? So you talk to your friends about that kind of thing. What's causing this to happen? Why are we in the predicament that we're in? What needs to be done to fix it? Well, they passed this inflation bill, but I don't think it's going to do a whole lot to fix it because it spent a lot of money on solar panels and car chargers and things like that. There wasn't really anything about stopping inflation in there. So, it's the government, right? And then we can all agree, it's the government, right? And then you tell stories about how, they hired 87,000 IRS agents. And if you divide that out, Nebraska's going to get about 8,000 of those 87,000 IRS agents. So let's just assume that one agent is able to investigate one business annually. That's 8,000 Nebraska small businesses that are going to get audited that wouldn't have been audited before. And let me tell you guys, no matter how good you keep your books, all these gift cards that I buy, I'm terrified one day someone from the IRS is going to be like, so you spent like $30,000 at Hy-Vee last month. Are you eating a lot of beef there, Thor? No, I have to keep every single receipt showing that I activated gift cards for Amazon and then match that up with Amazon activations just to prove to people who might never come that I'm not stealing from myself or stealing from the government, stealing my money from the government. Anyway, so the fact I do this show, does that mean I'm going to get one of those audits? You got to think about these things. So I got to keep all these receipts and all these records and make sure that everything is on the level, and which is what most small businesses do anyway. But no matter how careful you are, there's always going to be something, some little thing that they're able to get you on in the penalties and the interest, and it all floods back, and all of a sudden you owe $1 bajillion. And of course, there's the time and the expense. If you get audited, you don't just take the piece of paper and start filling out the paperwork. No, you got to go hire a tax attorney. You could try to do it yourself, but you're a fool if you do. You go hire the tax attorney, and they do it for you, and you drop $10,000, $20,000 on a tax attorney. Because that's the kind of money we're talking about. The IRS coming after you could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. 8,000 businesses a year in Nebraska are going to potentially be audited because of that inflation bill. how is taking money away from small businesses, and I'm talking to somebody who works as the HR person for a small business, how is taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from small businesses helping you give employees a raise? And she's like, oh, it's not. It's terrible. I have people asking for raises all the time, and I can't do it because we just don't have it in the budget. We don't have it in the budget because of this, that, and the other. Exactly. So it's like that's the thing. These conversations are not. You're not going to make these conversions in a campaign ad. You're not going to make these conversions by sending migrants to Martha's Vineyard. You're going to consolidate your base doing that. You're going to establish your credentials among the base. You're going to illustrate the absurdity of the opponent's position. But then when that's all said and done, you're going to be left with the same base you had before. You've got to get these people in the middle. And these people in the middle are reasonable human beings. They're not uber lefties or uber righties. They're not MAGA. They're not, they probably couldn't tell you how Obamacare impacted their lives at all anymore. They just don't follow that stuff. That's not on their radar because life is on their radar. So you talk to them about how it's impacting life. Like, how is it that public school enrollment is down 27% nationwide, yet we're spending more per student than ever? Why is it that we appropriated all this COVID money for schools to update their HVAC systems, but my school district's air conditioner is broken because it is 15 or 20 years old? Oh, it's the supply chain. We can't get the parts. There were bids. It's been ordered. The money's been appropriated and spent? No. You're just sitting. That's the scary thing, is so many institutions are sitting on this huge slush fund of COVID money that hasn't been spent yet. You want to talk about inflationary? We still have that money coming into the marketplace. It's intense. So I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. You got to have a core compass in life, or you will fall for everything and anything. There are definitely areas of my life that I believe other people who believe differently from me are idiots, right? But just because they believe differently doesn't mean they can't learn. And just because I believe differently, you have to at least be open to the possibility that I could be wrong. What if global warming is man-made? What if my F-150 truck is literally killing the planet? When I was a kid, they told me my aerosol hairspray in the 80s was killing the planet. So I switched to pump. I told my mom when she was going to the grocery store, Mom, don't buy me the aerosol bottle. Can you buy me the pump because it's better for the environment? And they told me that smoking was bad and that, if your parents are smoking, you should tell them to stop. So I went upstairs and I cut all my mom's cigarettes in half so she'd stop smoking. I got my ass tied. I got beat for that one. But, it's like these are the things that, you have to acknowledge the possibility you could be wrong, right? We all are products of the information we consume, and the information we consume is created by a disturbingly small number of sources. So you got to acknowledge the possibility you're wrong. And in acknowledging that, in seeking out facts that contradict yours, you overcome what's called bias confirmation, where you only look for news stories that reinforce your perspective. Like Gavin Newsom. Is it possible that the hair gel in his hair has impacted his brain? As Ron DeSantis says, it could happen, right? In the meantime, you've got Governor Newsom in California buying billboards saying, don't move to Texas because your kids are going to get killed in high school by an AR-15. Wow. Both sides believe they're right. And until each side is able to look at the situation, are your kids in Texas going to get killed by an AR-15 in school? The odds of your kid being killed in a school shooting are next. They're more likely to get run over like that parent did this week by a school bus. As the driver fled with the parent's child that the parent was desperately trying to get off the bus. Then they ran over the parent for the safety of the other children. There was no charges filed against the bus driver, who literally ran somebody over and drove away. You can do that for the safety of the children. I killed your mom for your own good. Huh. Yeah. So there's definitely some things in the world that aren't quite right that I would disagree with. But again, if you're able to look at a situation and say, maybe I'm wrong, let me at least look at the other side of it, you'll at least get a better understanding of where the people are coming from so that you can find those reasonable people, because there are nuts in the bunch on both sides. And there's nothing you can say to the nuts to make them less nutty. But there are reasonable people in there that enjoy nuts from time to time, and you can definitely influence them. And those are the people that are going to decide the next elections. All right. Soapbox getting down. Oh, let's see. Go back up here. Comments. Here we go. Let's see, Fox. Sorry, I stopped marking them as I was reading them, and now I don't know where I left off, so I have to go back. And a lot of players are more concerned about money. We did that one. There's Sebastian there. 4 yards per play is the answer. Yeah, that literally, that's football, is 4 yards. It's 4 yards every play. That's all you need. You win a football game. Homemade food is awesome. My wife is an amazing cook, Mark. Like, the other day she said something like, I don't know, the cost of gas is getting so high, maybe we should eat out more and cook less at home. And I was like, no. like I'm the one making the food. No, that's not going to happen. Keep making the food. All right. Richard says, my first house was at 10.5% interest and I managed. But the thing is, though, like your first house, though, was what, $30,000? I don't know. I'm just guessing, whereas now you can't buy a car for $30,000. So the problem with percentage interest rates is 10% of 30,000 is a lot less than 10% of 250,000. And so I don't see house prices dropping to 30,000 anytime soon. Neighbor next door to us listed her house for sale. And that house has had, I don't know if it's got like a demonic oppression on it or what. That house has had the worst line of people moving in and out of it. The alcoholics coming in, crashing into the garage at night, domestic disturbances. We're like, really? Like, you're that house in the neighborhood? And you live next to us? Great. Did I mention we're looking at other houses? Maybe with a little space between the houses, just a little. I mean, I don't mind neighbors, but I love you from a distance. Like, not like Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod distance. That's too far. But like, smaller, like Martha's Vineyard distances, like Obama's house has distance, like that kind of distance. So anyway, I don't know how people can afford it. Like literally, if you go look, we refinanced our house at literally the cheapest interest rate when it was the lowest it was. We refinanced our house. We took a little bit of money out. We redid the kitchen a little bit because it needed it and put some carpet in. So we put a little bit back into the house, refinanced it, switched it from a 30 to a 15. Okay, so we basically put the mortgage back to the same amount it was when we first bought the house, but we set it at a 15-year payoff instead of a 30 payoff, and my payment went up $150 a month. That's it. Now, if I go look at like Zillow, it tells you the Zestimate, like the estimated payment for your house given current interest rates. The estimated payment for our house given current interest rates is nearly double what I'm paying now per month. We refinanced it at 2.75. So, wow. Like, if you told me tomorrow my mortgage was going to double, we would definitely be making some cuts in the Schrock household somewhere else to cover that. Because, we're doing okay over here at Schrock, but I'm not independently wealthy. I'm still doing the show every week, guys, If I outsource the show, things are going good. But, so 10.5% interest, that's heart-stopping for people now. Woke up last night for a radio show where a guy was explaining the liberal agenda. He said it was to keep the status quo of those who are raping the system, including the Republicans, and that's why Trump failed. Yeah, like I said, there's people on both sides of the spectrum that believe what they want to believe. There's been a couple things that Tucker's gone off on lately. Usually I'm pretty like, okay, that makes sense, Tucker, but there's been a couple things lately I've been like, really? Really? Like, there was one thing he was, and forgive me, I don't have it in front of me, he was outright wrong about. And he got schooled on it. And of course, all the articles on the left is Tucker Carlson gets schooled and whatever. Well, the one time he actually was wrong and he deserved to be schooled about it, nobody read your story, left-wing media, because you're saying he should be schooled about everything he says every day. If you just criticized the stuff that was actually wrong and just didn't mention him the rest of the time, imagine, people might not even know he exists, Wow. Greg, oh man, liberals are stupid people. I'm hoping that's a gaffe and not a reflection of how you view things. That's what I was saying, Greg, is that if you sit down and say that everyone who disagrees with you is an idiot, eventually you find yourself being the idiot. Because no one's right all the time about everything. So, yes, I think it's incredibly stupid to think that solar and wind energy is going to replace fossil fuels anytime in my lifetime, or my child's lifetime, or their child's lifetime. The tech is not there. The odds of cold fusion coming into play before wind and solar are able to power anything of significance is way higher. And if we really wanted to be investing in a future of energy, we have proof of concept now with magnetic containment on cold fusion. That's where all the charger money, all the EV battery money, all the subsidies, that should all be going to that. Because you crack that nut, and all of a sudden you don't need nuclear power plants anymore, you don't need fossil fuels anymore, you don't need gasoline anymore, you don't need natural gas anymore. You can have everything pristine in the environment you want, and you can have one power plant powering an entire continent. You revolutionize space travel. You can now colonize space because you have unlimited energy in the palm of your hand. That's innovation. That's where we need to go. You're not going to get there with a solar panel. It's just stupid. Now, I say it's just stupid. Does that mean that I don't have solar-powered gear? No, I have solar panels. Solar panels, solar power has its place. Like when I'm camping in the woods and I want to charge a backup battery so I can keep my kids' devices going if they need them. That's good for solar power. I can charge my backup battery on a big solar panel. Running my home on solar, well, I would need a giant battery in the wall to hold the energy, the Tesla Powerwall. Do you know how much fossil fuel is used in the construction of that battery? Way more than I'm ever going to consume in my house. So how am I saving the planet by going and converting to solar energy? So there are definitely some areas in which the logic doesn't add up. And if you want to call that stupidity, you can call that stupidity, but the logic doesn't add up. But there are other areas where people are just like, okay, so if somebody believes that man-made global warming is destroying the earth and the only answer is to get rid of fossil fuels, and they believe that to their core, does that mean that everything else they believe is stupid too? Of course not. Does that mean that person is not intelligent? No. We're all a product of the information that we have at our disposal. The same reason I thought I was going to save the freaking planet by not using aerosol hairspray. How stupid. There was a lot of hairspray in the 80s, but I don't think there was that much. Now look, the ozone hole is gone. Where's all the news stories celebrating that? The ozone layer, the hole is closing. It's not that it could be a naturally occurring phenomenon or anything that we don't understand yet. No, it has to be something that we did. We must be responsible for it in some way. If I'm on the left, I'm taking a victory lap. Remember in the 80s when I said stop using hairspray? Finally, all those aerosols from hairspray leaked out into space, and now the Earth is healing. But the Earth can never heal, because as soon as the Earth heals, all the people making money off of the green movement lose their power. It's the same reason why we went from global cooling and the population bomb in the 1970s now to global warming, and then because global warming didn't make sense because you were having a global warming celebration during a snowstorm, now it's climate change. So now anytime there's any aberrant weather that is outside the boundaries of normal, that's our fault because of climate change. It's not that there's always been weather outside the boundaries of normal throughout the entire existence of mankind. It couldn't be that. It has to be that we're causing it. And if you only spend more money, you can fix it. That's a hustle. That's just a hustle. That's not fixing anything. Do you think that, How many trees does John Kerry have to plant so he can fly around in his private jet to convince other people that they're using too much energy? You know, the greater good, right? That's the thing. I am doing more for the greater good because I am going out and changing policies. So yes, I'm using some fossil fuels to get me to point A to point B so that I can stop a country from making fossil fuel mistakes. That's the argument. Look at what's happening in Europe right now. Europe is literally going to be burning cow crap this winter to stay warm because they've got no gas. They have no terminals to import the gas from America, even if we had the gas to send them, which we don't because we aren't fracking anymore. And if you think, well, just let's start fracking again, you can't because of the ESG movement has restricted investment in oil and gas enterprises. So you can't get a loan to get the equipment to go frack and get the gas out of the ground or to buy the lease. So you've literally handicapped the entire industry. And now we're going to see the consequence of that. And a lot of people are going to come around and say, this was stupid. This was bad. Whoever thought of this is an idiot. And then they'll rebrand into something different. From climate change, it'll become something else, and then it'll move on. So, Greg, I don't think liberal people are all idiots. If they were, I wouldn't hang out with them. But there are certain aspects of ideology that I really don't agree with. And there's probably people listening right now that don't agree with me. And that's fine. We can move on as friends and talk about other things. We can go to dinner. We can have a good time. We can laugh about the waitress saying inappropriate things at inappropriate times. We can have you over for my son's baptism. We can still be cordial human beings and friends without having to agree lockstep on every single thing in the world. But there are a few things that I'm willing to plant my flag in, and the production of energy is one of them. DuckDuckGo must be expensive to operate. How do they make money? Grants. Number one grant giver, ironically, is Google. Yeah, they get all their money from Google. It's grants. Yeah, so Google gets tax write-offs for supporting DuckDuckGo, the privacy browser that blocks Google. Yeah, not perfect. The world is not perfect. Okay. I'll give Sebastian Pete's book, Battle of the American Mind, to get a better perspective of how this all started over 100 years ago and the education of our kids back then and now. Yeah, I mean, education is definitely a source of it. That's why there's so many battles around education. This is why they won't pass anything to deal with insider congressional stock trading. They love being able to make money. Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, what would you pass? Like, okay, so if you're elected to Congress, you can't trade stocks. Okay. So when does the ban happen? Does it when you take office, and then while you're there? What happens if you have stocks? What happens if you have a 401k? Are you not allowed to have a retirement account if you choose to serve in Congress at all? Do you have to put it into like a third-party trustee? Do you really think that the congressman's not going to call the trustee and be like, hey, hot tip? That's the thing. So the way you deal with insider information, the government being able to invest on insider information, is you get the government out of the inside. Why are companies telling the government anything about what's going to happen? They have to. They want the next bailout. They want the next EV tax credit. The $7,000 tax credit for EVs, and the cost of EVs goes up $7,000 like overnight. Oh, but nobody gets the tax credit because it doesn't. No EV qualifies for it right now because all the EVs that will qualify for it have to have a certain percentage of their components made in America, which doesn't exist right now and can't exist because we don't have the mines to mine the minerals to make the batteries. And we can't do that because to do that, guess what we need? Fossil fuels. And you can't get a loan for that. So there isn't going to be any rare earth mining in America. We aren't going to make any batteries in America with American lithium. We aren't going to qualify anybody for tax credits on EVs. And electric vehicles just got $7,000 more expensive. And you better buy one because that's the only way that you're going to save the world and save the planet, because cutting out your aerosol hairspray just isn't enough anymore. And you see, that's why people, that line of logic is why people look at the whole kit and caboodle and say, what a donkey show. Now, if the government wasn't involved, Why is the government giving you a tax credit to buy a car? Why is the government paying to put a charging station up for a car, for Tesla? Why is the government doing a lot of things they're doing? They shouldn't be. And if you get the government out of the inside, a lot of this insider trading stuff will take care of itself. Because if the government doesn't have the ability to influence industry, then there's no insider trading to be had, aside from just your normal garden variety, hey, Bob, you're my friend, let me tell you a tip, that kind of thing. But again, making the argument you need to get the government out of something is like, making the argument you need to get rid of fossil fuels. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. There isn't enough energy on the world to make things run with renewables, and there aren't enough honest people on the earth to get the government out of everything. There just aren't. All right. Time for me to roll, guys. I appreciate you joining us on the program today. Hopefully, I try not to go down the political rabbit hole too deeply because it turns people off. But some of the things in life that we deal with, it's expressed through politics. And some of the absurdities we deal with, and knowing what's coming next helps you prepare yourself and your family for life. One of the things that, with COVID, a lot of, not going to say I'm clairvoyant, but we saw a lot of that coming. I was looking back through the shows to find, I was going to be gone a few weeks back, and we were trying to put together a best of program. And so I went back to January of 2000, and I was listening to the opening segment of that show, and it was like, gosh, guys, are you seeing what's happening in China right now? Like, people just dropping over dead in the sidewalk. This is pretty serious stuff. That's what you heard me say on the radio show. What you didn't hear me say on the radio show was Schrock Innovations is taking out an SBA loan so that we can buy laptops and parts now, because if this many people are dropping dead in China, this is going to spread. And all of our stuff comes from China. I didn't think that it was going to shut down the world. I don't want to claim that I knew that. But I certainly thought it was going to cause people in China to die, which is going to impede the supply chain. So we better buy our supplies now. Because I didn't know how much was in the supply chain, whatever. And it was crazy. It was like, wow, in 2000, if we could only go back in time and look at yourself in 2000 and be like, you don't know the half of it, buddy. And I feel like right now I'm at a place in the world where 2 years from now I want to go back in time and wave my pen in my face and say, you don't know the half of it, buddy. Because you just feel like the other shoe is coming. The other shoe is dropping. There was somebody who was saying, there's been a lot of comparisons, to those 70s and the 80s from the inflation argument. This is like Carter. And somebody made the point the other day, this isn't Carter. This isn't Carter at all. This is Nixon. This is Nixon inflation. The Carter inflation is coming. Think about that, if that's true. Whew. Yeah, that would be bad. So I'll leave you with that parting thought. So like I said, 2 years from now, we'll come back and be like, Thor, if you'd only known. But in the meantime, guys, take care of what's important. Take care of your family. Take care of what you have so you don't have to buy new. Take care of your tech. Make sure you keep your updates done. Make sure you keep your maintenance up to standard. We're giving you specials on all of it, so trying to keep it affordable for you. And make sure you spend time with your family today because they're the most important thing. We'll see you all again next week for another edition of Compute This.